Today at 1, 2 people are dead after a car and knife attack at a synagogue in Manchester on Yom Kippur, the holiest day in the Jewish calendar. The suspect is believed to have been shot dead by armed police. A vehicle was driven into members of the public outside the synagogue and a man was stabbed. A bomb disposal unit is now at the scene. The Prime Minister has cut short a trip to Denmark and is flying back to Britain to chair a meeting of the government's Emergencies Committee this afternoon.
The attack in Manchester this morning is absolutely shocking, and all of our thoughts are with those affected. I'm on my way back to London. When I arrive, I will chair an emergency COBRA meeting. I'm already able to say that additional police assets are being deployed to synagogues across the country, and we will do everything to keep our Jewish community safe.
We'll have the very latest from the scene here in North Manchester, where emergency services have sealed off the area, with the synagogue just round the corner at the end of the road to our left.
Yes, we'll bring you more details on the attack as they come into us during the programme, also this lunchtime. Planned reforms to the UK asylum system. Refugees will have to wait longer before they can apply to settle permanently in this country and face tighter controls on being joined by their families.
Any person's the worst to deal with. God, we so lose our job right now.
The Metropolitan Police unreservedly apologises after a BBC reporter went undercover at a London police station and found evidence of racist and misogynistic behaviour. And one other headline, police in Australia make a possible breakthrough in their search for a 3-year-old British girl who disappeared from a beach half a century ago.
On BBC London, the Met Commissioner tells BBC London he won't resign after the Panorama investigation. London's mayor says he feels sickened and angry after watching the undercover filming at Charing Cross.
Good afternoon, and we start with breaking news this lunchtime that 2 people have been killed and 3 others seriously injured in a car and knife attack at a synagogue in northern Manchester. The suspected attacker is believed to have been shot dead at the scene by armed police. A bomb disposal unit is currently there amid fears the suspect had explosives strapped to his body. Well, it happened at the Heaton Park Hebrew Congregation Synagogue in Crumpsall on Yom Kippur, which is the holiest day in the Jewish calendar. The Prime Minister has said he's appalled by the attack and is flying back early from a meeting of European leaders in Copenhagen. The King says he is deeply shocked and saddened. Let's get the very latest then from our correspondent Danny Savage, who is at the scene at the synagogue for us now. And Danny, what more details do you have?
I think, Ben, when I first arrived here this morning, the first thing that struck me was the shocked silence in the streets around this area. We know there was obviously absolute chaos and terror and fear around here at about 9:30 this morning, but it's now completely quiet apart from the noise of a police helicopter hovering overhead. What we know is at 9:31 this morning a 999 call was made by a member of the public reporting that a car had driven into members of the public outside a synagogue here in North Manchester, and a man was also seen to be stabbing people as well. That was at Heaton Park Hebrew Congregation Synagogue, just beyond the cordon here around to our left. At 9:37, 6 minutes later, police declared a major incident, and at 9:38, police fired shots at the person who had been driving that car. So within 7 minutes, the situation was, as it were, contained by the police. Now, for much of the morning, it was thought that we were looking at a situation where the person who had been driving that car, the attacker, had been shot dead and 4 people had been injured. But at about 12:30 this afternoon, Greater Manchester Police released further information to say that 2 people had been killed and 3 others were seriously injured. The attacker is believed to be dead, but the extra information from the police at that point is that they couldn't actually get to his body because of things that he's got on him. Now, I've heard eyewitnesses talking about that they fear that he had something that looked like a bomb strapped to him at the time, and the bomb disposal unit are here. This is an area with a very large Jewish community. This is an Orthodox Jewish synagogue round the corner from us, and if you drove through this area, you would be in no doubt that this is an area with a large Jewish population. That is the situation so far. Philip Norton has a summary of what's happened this morning.
The scene outside a Manchester synagogue as a suspected attacker is confronted by police. It's shortly after a car was driven at and hit members of the public outside Heaton Park Hebrew Congregation Synagogue. A man was stabbed, another, believed to be the offender, was shot by police. The suspect is believed to have died. 2 members of the public caught up in the attack are now confirmed dead. 3 others have been seriously injured.
Literally, we was just driving up the road, just doing our normal deliveries. Next minute, we was held back in a little bit of traffic, and we thought we could see like a car had like crashed. So we just thought it was a normal collision. Anyway, as we got a bit closer, we seen a guy like bleeding out on the floor. And he was just basically unconscious on the floor, presumed obviously dead. And then there was a guy in front of the car. He's just lay on the floor. We couldn't really see him. And then, like, there was a few people stood on the road. Somebody shouted something. He's in the school or the synagogue or what it was. And then as we looked over, the guy had a knife and he was just stabbing the window, trying to get in the school. And then within seconds, the police arrived. They gave him a couple of warnings. He didn't listen, so they opened fire. He went down on the floor and then he started getting back up and then they shot him again.
The attack at the synagogue comes on Yom Kippur, the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, when many Jewish families will be attending a synagogue. Police say a large number of worshippers were inside the building at the time. The Prime Minister has cut short a trip to Denmark, flying back to chair an emergency government COBRA meeting.
The attack in Manchester this morning is absolutely shocking, and all of our thoughts are with those affected. I'm on my way back to London. When I arrive, I will chair an emergency COBRA meeting. I'm already able to say that additional police assets are being deployed to synagogues across the country, and we will do everything to keep our Jewish community safe. I've spoken to Mark Gardner of the CST and Andy Burnham, Mayor of Manchester, and I want to thank the emergency services for the speed of their response.
Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, said the immediate danger appeared to be over.
But there is a degree of reassurance that can be given here that it has been dealt with. It sounds as though very effectively, quickly, by Greater Manchester Police. So it would appear that the immediate danger has been averted, although it's obviously a developing situation.
In this video, which appears to be taken by a passerby and authenticated by BBC Verify, 2 armed officers can be seen pointing weapons at a figure laying on the ground. At one point, one of the officers shouts to members of the public nearby, "He has a bomb, go away." Seconds later, as the person being watched attempts to stand up, a sharp crack can be heard, and the person falls to the ground. We can already build a timeline of events that happened within the space of 10 minutes this morning. Greater Manchester Police say they were called by a member of the public at 9:31 to the synagogue on Middleton Road in Crumpsall. The caller told them he'd seen a car being driven towards members of the public and one man had been stabbed. 3 minutes later, firearms officers were deployed to the scene after further reports from the public a security guard had been attacked with a knife. At 9:38, a man, believed to be the offender, was shot by Greater Manchester Police firearms officers. At 9:41, paramedics arrived at the scene and began helping those who'd been injured. Greater Manchester Police declared a major incident. An army bomb disposal unit is at the scene. The King says he and the Queen are deeply shocked and saddened, especially on such a significant day for the Jewish community. Philip Norton, BBC News.
Let's get the latest from our political correspondent Helen Catt, who's in Downing Street for us now. And Helen, as we've heard, the Prime Minister cutting short that visit to Copenhagen, and he's going to be chairing a meeting of the government's emergency COBRA committee this afternoon.
Yes, he was briefed about the situation while he was still in Copenhagen. He has cut that visit short, as you said, to the European political community, and he is on his way back here to chair a COBRA. COBRA, of course, is the code name for the emergency committees that the government convenes when they need to deal with a major incident or some sort of large-scale issue. The contents of that meeting are always secret by their very nature, and we don't always know who, or ever know really exactly who is going to attend those. But for this sort of incident, you might expect, for example, the Home Secretary, some representatives of the security services perhaps, to be around that table too. It's not always chaired by the Prime Minister, but I think it is a sign of the significance of this incident that Sir Keir Starmer is coming back to chair this himself.
What about other political reaction today to this attack in Manchester?
Well, as you can imagine, there's been widespread condemnation of this attack, and particularly lots of political leaders pointing to the timing of this on Yom Kippur. So Sir Ed Davey, the Liberal Democrat leader, and Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform UK, have both issued statements. They both use the word horrified. They send their thoughts and prayers to the families, the victims, the emergency services, and the entire Jewish community. The Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, was actually doing a round of BBC local radio interviews when this was starting to emerge. So she said she hadn't heard the full details, but described it as an outrageous attack on the Jewish community that was vile and disgusting. Again, she said her heart goes out to the people who've been hurt by this. She also said, though, that we need to make sure that the rising anti-Semitism we're seeing in our country is quelled completely. And that is a theme that was echoed by Zach Polanski, the leader of the Green Party. Now, he is himself Jewish and grew up in Manchester. He says near Crumpsall. He said that made this feel deeply personal. He talked about rising anti-Semitism and the need to bring people together to find cohesion in our communities.
All right, Helen, thank you very much. Helen Catt reporting there. And we can also talk to our religion editor, Aleem Maqbool. And as we've been hearing, Aleem, this is a very, very significant day in the Jewish calendar, and there is this rising anti-Semitism that Helen was talking about.
Yes, well, certainly on the timing, if you speak to people in the Jewish community, they feel that carrying out an attack on a day like this is clearly designed to maximise the amount of hurt that is felt most broadly across the community. The most holy day in the Jewish calendar, a solemn day in any case, a Day of Atonement, a day when Jews believe that God is sealing the fate of each person for the next year. And so it is a day that is dedicated to prayer and reflection. And interestingly, as well as a lot of Jewish people not working on Yom Kippur, many also don't access social media, don't watch television, and so some will only find out the details of what has happened today in Manchester after nightfall today. But you're right in saying that certainly there are fears over a rise in anti-Semitism. Security is increased and security has been provided to synagogues, Jewish community centres, Jewish schools by an organisation called the Community Security Trust. For many years now, it is increased on Yom Kippur because a lot of Jews, even if they don't attend synagogues regularly, will go to a synagogue on Yom Kippur. There have been attacks around Europe against Jews on Yom Kippur. So certainly security had been increased, and we've seen over the last 2 years a sustained high level of anti-Semitism through the conflict in the Middle East. And this type of attack is exactly what a lot of British Jews had feared.
Aleem, thank you very much. Aleem Maqbool there, our religion editor. Let's go back to the scene and our correspondent who's there, Danny Savage. Danny, more details emerging all the time about this attack. What's the latest information you're getting?
Yeah, Ben, in the last few minutes, the BBC has verified a still image of who is believed the person to be the attacker here this morning. The BBC Verify confirmed that a still image said to show the perpetrator of today's attack in Manchester was taken from just outside the perimeter fence of the scene of the attack. The individual's appearance, bald head, beard, dark clothes, white objects around his waist, matches that of the man seen apparently shot by police at the same location in verified video from the scene of the attack. the photograph was taken on the western side of the Heaton Park Synagogue. So this appears to be the first confirmed image, if you like, of the perpetrator of today's attack here this morning at just after 9:30. I've also been talking to a few people just off camera here, members of the Orthodox Jewish community in this part of North Manchester, are talking about obviously their feelings at the moment of how upset and devastated they are about what's happened. And it's interesting, I've heard this from more than one person in the last half an hour, saying that they've been expecting something like this to happen for some time. They do feel that the feelings of anti-Semitism, hate crimes against the Jewish community are on the rise. We know that synagogues and schools and other Jewish establishments have security on the gate all of the time now, and it almost appears to be an explanation as to why, after what's happened today. So people have been expecting this. It's obviously a huge shock for it to actually happen at their synagogue in their community, but they are not surprised by today's incident happening here just after 9:30, when a car was driven into people standing outside the synagogue here on a very special day in the Jewish religious calendar of Yom Kippur. So people are very shocked, very upset, still observing their religious observations for the day, if you like, at the moment. So not many people from the community talking to us, but they are very clear that they believe something like this was potentially going to happen here at the moment.
All right,
Ben.
Danny, thank you very much. That's Danny Savage there, our correspondent at the scene in Manchester. Just to say, we'll be going back to that breaking news story later on in the programme. But let's look at some of the other stories of the day now. And as we heard, the Prime Minister has cut short that trip to Denmark today following the attack in Manchester. And our correspondent Jessica Parker is in Copenhagen for us now, because Jessica, Sir Keir Starmer had been there for a meeting with other European leaders, which was aimed at finding solutions on tackling illegal migration.
Yeah, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer indeed arrived in Copenhagen yesterday. We saw him this morning. He stopped briefly to talk to reporters, where, as you say, he said that he thought the main topics on the agenda were migration, also the war in Ukraine. And I have to say that latter subject really has dominated discussions here, including sanctions on Russia, concern about hybrid attacks as well. There have been repeated violations of European airspace recently, including here in Denmark, where drone sightings led to the closure of airports. It's led to quite a lot of soul searching about European defence, how Europe can better defend itself from those kinds of threats. Ukraine's President Zelensky is here, so is the NATO Secretary General. Having said that, no major decisions or outcomes are necessarily expected. The European political community is this fairly recently created forum that includes EU leaders, but leaders beyond the EU and Europe as well, hence why the United Kingdom was represented. Critics have suggested, though, that it's becoming something of a talking shop. Others argue it's a good thing for leaders to talk, but either way, discussions here go on in Copenhagen, but without the British Prime Minister because of events in Manchester.
Jess, thank you very much indeed. The head of the Metropolitan Police, Mark Rowley, says he is horrified by an undercover BBC investigation which showed racist and misogynistic behaviour by officers at Charing Cross Police Station. Officers were seen calling for immigrants to be shot, revelling in the use of force on suspects and being dismissive of rape claims. Well, 11 individuals are now under investigation. Just a warning, this report now by Daniel De Simone does contain some discriminatory language.
The Somalians are scum. Somalians are ugly. Any person has the worst deal with. God, we shall lose our job right now.
This is an off-duty Metropolitan Police officer, PC Phil Nielsen, talking about some of the communities of London he polices.
I've seen too many Islamics committing crimes. Their way of life is not the correct way of life.
And referring to cases he says he's dealt with.
Either put a bullet through his head or deport him.
The Met's chief gave his first response today after watching Panorama's undercover footage.
It's embarrassing for you that it's taken the BBC to uncover this and bring this to light. Do you take responsibility for what's happened? And are you going to say sorry?
We are sorry for what is in this. It's vile to watch, isn't it? They're ghastly individuals. They're racist, they're misogynist, they're bragging about use of excess force. It's completely unacceptable.
The Prime Minister gave his reaction.
It's shocking, and I'm glad the Commissioner's responding. He needs to be very robust in his response. Thank you.
Prime Minister, ring the buzzer for anything else, sir.
Panorama reporter Rory Bibb worked for 7 months at Charing Cross in a civilian role as a designated detention officer. Panorama discovered multiple cases of misogyny, racism and violent behaviour when it went undercover at Charing Cross police station.
He's got his boat right. He's just gone. This guy's
PC Martin Borg is talking about this, where a sergeant can be seen on CCTV stomping down twice. The officers suggested the man tried to kick the sergeant first. He was being restrained at the time. Martin Borg, who was in the cell, joked about he and his sergeant discussed what they'd write in their statements about the incident.
He tried to kick me yesterday, so I was absolutely decided. Absolutely so.
Whatever you say, sir.
It was like, thank you very much, mate.
Our undercover reporter saw openly misogynistic behaviour. This was Sergeant Joe McElvenny discussing a man accused of rape and domestic violence. The man had been released on bail.
That's what she says. What we put pretty people.
The sergeant's dismissive approach infuriates a female colleague.
The way you went, yeah, that's what she says. He stabbed her and stabbed her when she was pregnant. Like, don't. I thought it's going to go. But unfortunately, I can't. He's got stripes up the child.
The Commissioner said he doesn't accept his force is institutionally racist and misogynistic.
I'm not in a position to say the Met is perfect today, but I can say we're better than we were 3 years ago, and in a year's time we'll be far better again.
Charing Cross was the subject of a toxic culture scandal before, and it is again.
Have you considered your position? Have you considered resigning?
I'm not resigning. I'm proud of what our teams have done in terms of taking on these cancers within the organisation, the scale of the progress being made.
I simply wasn't prepared for what I saw when I watched the BBC programme last night. I felt and feel sickened, disgusted, angry and appalled.
Our investigation shows a toxic culture in the Met hasn't been eliminated. It's been driven underground. Daniel DeSimone, BBC News.
Well, our correspondent Emma Vardy joins us now for more on this. Emma, where does the police investigation into what happened there at Charing Cross Police Station, where does that go from here?
Well, both the Met are looking into this and the police watchdog, the IOPC. They have 11 people under investigation. One of the officers is now subject to a criminal investigation for allegedly perverting the course of justice. And the head of the Met, Sir Mark Rowley, said this morning that he wants this to happen really swiftly. He said where there is incontrovertible evidence of wrongdoing, then these officers will have a fast-track hearing on a likely path to dismissal. So that process is happening right now. But I think the scale of the challenge was really laid at the door of the Met once again today. And one of the difficult issues for the Met, as we saw in the panorama, is that police officers are well aware that their words or their actions can get them into trouble and that they have ways of hiding this or seemingly ways to justify their actions after an incident. And that is one of the things that Sir Mark Rowley is going to have to address. And what he talked about is using counter-terrorism techniques, the kind of techniques they use in those investigations, using within its own force, and that police officers will be getting more sophisticated at investigating and rooting out other bad officers. But I think the Met in particular is going to remain under some scrutiny in the way it tackles this issue for a while yet.
OK, Emma, thank you very much. Emma Vardy reporting there. And just to say, you can see more on this story in Panorama, Undercover in the Police, over on the BBC iPlayer right now. Some of the other stories of the day now, and hackers who attempted to extort a UK nursery chain by posting children's data and images on the dark web have removed the posts and claim to have deleted the information. The group began posting profiles of the children to its website last week and said it would continue until the Kiddo Schools group paid them a ransom in Bitcoin. A number of countries have expressed concern over Israel's interception of a flotilla attempting to carry aid to Gaza. Citizens from 4 different nations are among activists being taken to Israel, where the process of deporting them will begin. An Australian woman who killed her relatives by serving them a beef Wellington laced with poisonous mushrooms is to launch an appeal against her conviction. Erin Patterson was found guilty of 3 murders and 1 case of attempted murder and sentenced to life in prison. The grounds for her appeal have not yet been outlined. The COVID-19 inquiry has been hearing evidence about the impact of the pandemic on children and young people. In her testimony today, England's former Children's Commissioner, Baroness Anne Longfield, described some of the decision-making as chaotic. Our education editor, Bramwyn Jeffries, has this report.
Arriving with a bundle of her testimony, Anne Longfield had the job of speaking up for children. Today, giving evidence, she said ministers failed to consult.
I think in the run-up to schools being locked down, it was quite chaotic. It wasn't clear who had responsibility for planning for children, if anyone, nor what options were being considered, nor, if any, assessments were made about potential impact on children.
When schools closed for most pupils, little thought for children with special educational needs. Others were left vulnerable, trapped in troubled homes. At first, few went to school, even though they could.
There were very, very small numbers, less than 5% in the first few weeks. They grew into the, into 12, 15% eventually. It never got past 20% of vulnerable children attending schools.
With children at home, lots of support for the most vulnerable moved online.
I mean, all the indicators were that harm was increasing, the figures I talked around with domestic abuse and the like. But the oversight wasn't there. The protective factor of school wasn't there.
The inquiry was reminded of Arthur Lavinia Hughes. The 6-year-old was tortured and killed in June 2020. Just a toddler, Star Hobson, was also murdered at home, despite concerns raised multiple times with authorities. In her evidence today, Anne Longfield set out the many unintended consequences of the lockdowns for children, consequences that weren't fully thought through. She said their needs were too often put behind those of pubs, restaurants and adults. Bramwyn Jeffries, BBC News, at the COVID-19 inquiry.
And a reminder of our main story this lunchtime. 2 people have been killed after an attack at a synagogue in Manchester on Yom Kippur, the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, and armed police have shot dead the suspected assailant. We'll have much more on that developing story from our correspondent at the scene. Also, we're going to have a full weather forecast for you in the next half an hour. Let's get a quick summary of that, though, now with Darren Bett. Hi, Darren.
Thanks very much, Ben. Well, the weather's going to be going downhill as we head into Friday. Storm Amy arriving from the Atlantic. It will get windy everywhere later Friday, overnight and into Saturday. The worst of the weather, more for the northwestern half of the UK. That's where we're more likely to have some damaging winds and some disruption. And we now have an amber wind warning for the northwest of Scotland, 60, 70 miles an hour widely. Could get significantly more than that in places. That warning starts on Friday evening, continues overnight and into Saturday morning. But I'll have more details, Ben, later on.
Darren, thank you. See you later on. Let's take you back then to our top story this lunchtime. 2 people have been killed and 3 others have been seriously injured in that car and knife attack at a synagogue in northern Manchester. And the suspected attacker is believed to have been shot dead at the scene by armed police. We can go back to our correspondent, Danny Savage, who is there for us at the scene. Danny, details coming in all the time. What's the latest information you have?
in the last few minutes, Ben, there's been quite a loud bang from around the corner from the scene of the incident this morning. It's not unclear if that was a controlled explosion or not, but it's the second one we've heard in the last half an hour. And we do know that the bomb disposal unit are here because Greater Manchester Police have said that there were suspicious items on the perpetrator's body and they haven't been able to get close to him since they shot him just after 9:30 this morning. The Prime Minister has said that additional police assets are being put at synagogues around the country after this morning's incident here in Manchester. And a little earlier on today, we heard from Graham Stringer, who's the local MP for the area here.
There is, and has been for a long time, security on every synagogue. There is a large Jewish school near the synagogue called King David's. There is security on there, it makes me, well, I'm appalled that it is necessary to have security on a school, and that those children feel themselves to be at risk when they do security drills if there is an attack on the school.
It has almost become the norm, or it is the norm now, for Jewish establishments in Manchester and other parts of the UK to have security on the gates at the moment. It is something that is part of everyday life at schools and synagogues. Interestingly, I've had a note from a contact who was at a synagogue in northwest London this morning saying during the Yom Kippur service the security head made an announcement about an incident at a synagogue not in London, and congregants were advised to keep their children with them and people were advised not to leave. He was saying that there's always security at the synagogue and it didn't appear to be beyond the usual, but this will of course see security stepped up at Jewish establishments across the UK until police can establish whether or not this was some sort of lone incident, lone figure involved, or whether this was a more organised plot. That we don't know, and that we know is what the police and security services will be working on behind the scenes at the moment, Ben.
All right, Danny, thank you once again. That's Danny Savage, our correspondent there at the scene. And BBC Verify's Merlin Thomas has this analysis now of what we do know so far about the attack.
This is a developing story, and we're still piecing together the details as they're emerging of the attack at Heaton Park Synagogue in Manchester. Now, we've been investigating a video that's circulating on social media from the scene of the attack, which appears to show the moment police opened fire on a suspect at the synagogue. In the video we verified, we can see two armed police officers, both with their weapons raised and pointing at someone lying on the ground. And then as the camera pans, we can see a man lying on the ground just outside the grounds of the synagogue wearing a kippah, a Jewish cap. We can see him lying in a pool of blood. Now, one of the officers then approaches the fence where a small group of people had gathered, and the officer then shouts loudly, "Everybody else, he has a bomb, go away." Seconds later, the figure that was being watched by police attempts to stand up, sharp cracks ring out, and the man falls to the ground. Now, there are a few people standing by watching in a panic as the police attend to the scene and others hurry away. We've also verified a still image circulating online showing a man believed to be a suspect at the synagogue, wearing 3 white objects around his waist. Now, the individual's appearance, bald head, beard, dark clothes, white objects around his waist matches that of a man seen apparently shot by police at the same location in verified video from the scene of the attack. Now, we can't confirm the identities of any of the people in the video. This is still a developing story, and at BBC Verify we'll continue piecing together what happened.
Merlin Thomas reporting, and let's go to our Home Affairs correspondent Daniel Sanford, who joins me now. And as we've heard, Daniel, the government says security will be stepped up at other synagogues around the country in the wake of this attack.
Yeah, the Prime Minister himself has said that the police will be deploying what he called extra assets to synagogues across the country. I mean, almost all synagogues, as we've heard, do have a degree of their own security, and there's quite complex security systems at many synagogues and Jewish schools across the country. But I think that at all, if not all, then most synagogues for the rest of today, you're going to be seeing police officers also being deployed. And of course, lots of people are at synagogues today because of it being Yom Kippur. That's where people go on this, the most holy of the Jewish days. So yes, I think there will be substantial numbers of police officers being deployed, but obviously there are a lot of synagogues in the UK, so quite how many police officers are going to be deployed to each synagogue, I think, is less clear.
Daniel, the Prime Minister chairing a meeting of the government's emergency committee, COBRA, this afternoon. What exactly is that? Tell us more about that and what it might be doing in the wake of this attack.
Yeah, I think the seriousness of this attack is illustrated by the fact that the Prime Minister, who was actually quite an important intergovernmental meeting today, has immediately flown back to personally chair the COBRA meeting. COBRA, which is named after the Cabinet Office briefing room where it takes place, is at ministerial level the most senior emergency committee which can meet in the country, and it normally meets in response to national crises like severe flooding and terrorist attacks. And the fact that the Prime Minister's flying back to chair a committee which will also be attended by the Home Secretary and senior counter-terrorism police officers, I think shows the seriousness with which this attack is being taken. The threat level in the UK still is at substantial, which is what it's been since early 2022, but substantial means that an attack is likely, and looks today like we've had, if it hasn't been officially described as a terrorist attack, certainly what looks to be an ideological attack on a synagogue in Manchester.
OK, Daniel, thank you very much indeed. That's Daniel Sanford, our Home Affairs correspondent, with the latest there. And now it is time to join our colleagues for a look at the news wherever you are.